Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Raising Healthy Mothers. Today I want to talk about why I hate the concept of family-friendly meals. Or rather, I don't obviously hate the concept of them, I like the idea of them, but I hate the phrase family-friendly meals because, well, basically because I just don't really know what it means. At the last seasonal reset that I did back in September, I think it was, someone asked me, are the recipes family friendly? And I was a little bit stumped because I was like, well, I curated the recipes and I'm going to cook them for me and my family, and I'm going to adapt it so that my family, particularly my fussy eaters, are going to eat some of it, if not all of it, so that it's friendly to my family. But what does it mean? Like, what does family friendly meals mean? And this episode actually was triggered because a reel popped up on my Instagram, like recommended for me, that was, here is how I completely changed my life by doing all these family friendly meals. And it's one of those where you kind of make loads of dump bags and put them in the freezer, and then you pull them out the night before you want to cook it, let it defrost, and then put it in the slow cooker in the morning. It seems like such a brilliant concept, right? And I can see how that could be so life-changing for you if you had children and family that would want to eat that food. But that's why I have this problem with the phrase family-friendly meals, because they're very rarely friendly to my family. And so when someone says to me, here, have these amazing family-friendly sort of meal plans, I'm like, well, I don't think it's going to work for me and my family because I know my children, I know they're fussy. And frankly, I know myself. I don't think I want to eat that every single day, okay? Now, obviously, you do whatever works for you and your family. So I'm not saying, I'm not criticizing these people. This has been life-changing for them, and I totally get that. But I suppose it's the fact that it's kind of promoted as like, this is going to solve all of your problems as a mother. And I'm like, but it won't solve mine. And then, there's the other extreme. And this is often those kind of wellness accounts that are, quite frankly, a little bit smug. They seem completely unrealistic and out of touch with how organised their kitchen is and how perfect and pristine it is. And, the kids are sort of waking up in the morning and drinking some kind of wholesome sunshine milk in the morning and eating these amazing energy balls for snacks, like they're never going to sort of eat a bar of chocolate or something. I mean, my kids just wouldn't dream of eating any of those things. Mine won't even touch cucumber, which is supposed to be the one vegetable that is like saves dinner for every family. It doesn't work in my family. My kids won't eat cucumber. My son says they're too wet. And actually, it's genuinely the reason why I don't like sharing, those kind of Instagram reels that are like, what my family eat in a day or in a week, or what my kids will eat today. I think they're really unfair because, honestly, if I am going to post one of those reels, I'm probably going to choose a day where they've kind of eaten, fairly well, rather than on those days when they have pizza and nugget and chips. And it's not that I don't share it because I'm ashamed, but because I don't want to add the guilt to my followers, to my audience, to you, about what you should or maybe shouldn't be feeding your kids. That's not fair, because my context is so different from your context. What my family will eat is so different from what your family will eat, and vice versa. And that's why the concept of family-friendly meals I find so difficult, because I'm like, well, what does that mean? Because what is friendly to one family is different to mine. And just for the avoidance of doubt, if you did wonder what my kids have been eating the last few days, well, as I'm recording this, we've just had Halloween, which means my kids have basically spent the last 2 days making their way through an enormous bucket of chocolate and sweets after going trick-or-treating. They have finally come to the end of them. It took them 2 days to get through it all, and you know what? That's fine. Once it's over, it's over. We don't really keep many sweets in the house, so they know that once it's over, it's over. What's quite interesting is when I started introducing food to my eldest particularly, I had this really idealized view of eating together as a family, letting them into the kitchen, letting them help me cook, these really sort of fantasy images of family life, right? And I was pretty smug that as a baby, my eldest ate pretty much everything up until he was, somewhere over 2. And then, of course, he hit 2.5 and he started to become incredibly picky. And then even worse when his sister was born when he was just over 3. And now my youngest has just turned 3 herself, and she's definitely showing signs of being quite particular with her food. I think a lot of that is more to do with the fact that she's just following his lead, but whatever. But here's the thing, I was a really fussy child too. Like, I really was. And I don't know how long I was fussy for, and I don't know what my parents did. But here I am now, 35-ish years later, totally eat everything and teach people how to cook and eat and what's healthy for them, and also how to cope with fussy eaters. So hopefully that will give you some kind of hope that it's all not lost if your child is fussy. I have really struggled with the concept of family-friendly eating because my children do have such limited palates, and almost anything that is ever suggested as family-friendly, like what you would normally consider to be family-friendly, like they don't really eat. And what I have come to realise, and this is something that I teach in my fussy eater workshop, is that one person's fussy eater could be someone else's dream scenario. Like, I would genuinely love it if my son would eat fish fingers and chicken nuggets, or if he would like deign to try pasta with sauce, because it would solve a lot of problems. You know, those days when you just want to get something on the table because you don't have time, you know, that would be a great option for me, quite frankly. And what I find is that when one fussy eater's like parent lists out what their child will eat, I'm always envious, you know, and it's why it's a part of the fussy eater workshop. I get people to list out all the food that their child eats, and more often than not, they're quite surprised that actually it is more than they thought. And when you think about comparing your list to someone else will look at that list and be like, my goodness, I wish my child would, you know, reliably eat cucumber and carrot sticks at dinner time. So honestly, this is the thing I have, right, with fussy eating and family, kind of the idea of family-friendly meals, is that it's so contextual. Every child is so different and every family is so different. So what does it generally tend to mean when people talk about family-friendly meals? So it tends to be, you know, things like pasta with sauce, you know, where you might make like a big pasta bolognese and you know that your child's going to eat that, or chicken nuggets, or fish fingers. Like, I've mentioned all of these as well, but you know, those dump bags where you're like, oh, this is a family-friendly meal because it's not got spice in, or it's not got chili in, and I guess that's my problem with this concept of family-friendly meal. I'm like, well, what is it? What makes it family-friendly and not adult only? You know, other than like, you know, making something with copious amounts of wine that you're not cooking off, there is pretty much, or like, you know, super spicy that even an adult wouldn't really cope with it. What is like an adult only meal that is not like family friendly if you kind of live within a family, like that you're generally going to be cooking food that is family friendly? Another like common sort of family-friendly meal is pizza, right? And my son did actually briefly go through a phase where he stopped eating pizza, and that was a bit of a shock. But I do also know that there are families out there where the children won't eat pizza. They don't like the concept of having, you know, the sauce slathered on bread and covered in cheese, you know. So again, it's one of those kind of typical meals that people are like, oh yeah, you know, they'll always eat pizza. Well, I've taken kids out that haven't wanted pizza, and this also comes up again when you go out to eat and you kind of have like a kid-friendly menu, or you get like those packed lunches. And I'm always so disappointed because they're usually like expensive relative to the amount of stuff in there that my son will actually eat. So if you get like a packed lunch out, like he won't eat the raisins, he won't eat, you know, the fruit, he won't eat the certain things, right? He won't eat the yogurt, for example. So it's like you spend all this money on it, but actually you won't eat half of it. And similarly, kid-friendly meals, some of them are really good. It depends on the restaurant, right? But some of them are really, really good. And some of them, I'm like, there is no chance. More often than not, he would much rather eat a plate of deep fried calamari, like honestly, which again, I know some parents would be like super impressed by. But, you know, it's not usually on the kids menu, is it? And so it's usually quite expensive because it's on the like adult menu, and it's not exactly balanced. Like, there's no vegetables in there, right? But, you know, I tend to not really care. We don't go out to eat very much, and it's quite nice to get some protein in him. But the other thing about the kind of concept of family-friendly meals, or the term family-friendly meals, is that it doesn't really kind of think about the fact that some children just do have these sensory issues. They're very sensitive to things like, I don't know, food touching each other, or like sauce on their meals, or, you know, different colours or whatever. Like, it's clearly not designed for those children who are maybe struggle a little bit more than the average child when it comes to sensory things and food. And why does this all matter? Well, because I think as a mother, when you see these reels on Instagram, you can feel isolated, like you've done it wrong. When you see a family-friendly meal idea and you think, well, that's just not going to work for me, maybe you start feeling like you're failing because your children don't eat in this, you know, typical way that people kind of consider to be family-friendly. And so it's just another opportunity to make us feel guilty that something has gone wrong. And I feel like I can say this with authority, because even with my background in nutrition, and I'm a trained natural chef, I have genuinely found myself crying on my husband's shoulder because it is so hard to feed children who reject those typical kid-friendly foods and who are, very sensitive to certain foods. And so there is this kind of constant internal conflict between my professional knowledge, which is, I feel like they should be eating in a certain way. They need to be eating certain foods. They need to be getting certain nutrients, and the everyday reality of actually putting food in your children. And it took me ages to overcome that perfectionism of feeding them in the way that, I knew was correct from my nutrition kind of background. And that's really stressful. And, so I hope that kind of makes you feel a little bit better if this is what you're going through, that even though, I have this background, I have this knowledge, and I have, theoretically know the correct way to feed a child so they don't get fussy, I still ended up with a fussy eater. Thankfully, I'm in actually quite a down-to-earth nutrition group for sort of children, and I asked them, when I was kind of thinking about what food to do for my son's birthday party, I asked them for suggestions so that it was going to be not too full of junk food and rubbish, and they were all just like, honestly, just get some pizza and cut it up, and that is going to be what makes them happy. Get some pizza, get some crisps, get some biscuits. That's going to be what makes them happy. And I'm so glad they did say that, because it made me realize that the kind of aspiration I had as a mother, as a nutritionist who also is a mother, my aspiration was that, my children should, I should be offering really sort of good, balanced, healthy options at a child's party. But the reality is, from the experience of my nutrition colleagues, is actually sometimes it's best just to do what is easiest and what is going to get them to eat something. So I guess all that to say is that over time, I have shifted the way I think about food that is friendly to my family. So I instead of kind of trying to create these meals that is going to satisfy everyone and everyone's going to eat and enjoy and just try, instead of trying really hard to get my children, but especially my eldest, who is particularly fussy, to eat more and more food, I've shifted away towards doing things that is cooking meals that are just a lot more flexible, which makes it easier to adapt the dishes, the meals for everyone in the family, no matter what their preferences are. And I've started using things like leftovers much more smartly, reinventing them so that I don't get bored, and always trying to provide a meal that I know the children will enjoy. And this is important to me because I think I got really bogged down into the sort of making sure that the food that I was going to give them was going to be balanced and nutritious and, give them the right exposure. I was very aware that they had to be exposed to foods so many times before they would accept it. And it was just, I don't know, really getting me down, actually, how hard it was to meet all those criteria. And so what I realized was actually I was starting to get incredibly unmotivated, really bored of the food that I was cooking. I'd stopped enjoying food and I'd stopped enjoying cooking. And that was big for me because I love cooking. That's my big thing. It's my big sort of downtime, my creative outlet. And once I stopped enjoying cooking, what else did I have at that point, And that's why I'm in the middle of creating a meal planning guide, because I wanted to share how I shifted away from feeling this sort of pressure to always get particular meals on the table, because I want to help other mums feel a lot more in control and a lot less guilty and judged about the way that they're feeding their kids. So I have been writing a brand new meal planning guide designed with your family in mind. I'm not going to say they're family-friendly recipes because I don't know what are the recipes that are going to be friendly for your family. So I don't tell you exactly what to eat or what to cook. I don't really give proper recipes, but I give you guidelines on how to take some simple cooking concepts and turn them into meals that I think your family will eat, but most importantly that you are going to enjoy. And the way I do that is not saying, cook this meal or cook that thing, and I give you the concepts and I give you the ideas, and you get to choose exactly which of those actually appeal to you, because I'm not living your life. I don't have your taste buds and I don't have your fussy eaters. So in the guide, I help you understand how to adapt it to your personal context and your preferences. And I think ultimately this is why I struggle so much with family-friendly meals. They're just not friendly to my family because my context is so different. So it's all about taking great ingredients and adapting them for you, for your family, for your eaters, with those simple principles to guide you. And the other thing that I really kind of reflected on that worked. So, what was it that worked so well for my grandmother who had 4 children, had to feed 4 children on not a lot of money? And how did she do it? So I went back in time to how she used to cook for her family. And the way she did it was she would make a roast dinner once a week. And then out of that roast dinner, she would make 2 or 3 meals across the rest of the week. She knew how to bulk up the ingredients so that she could make it stretch to however many people she was feeding, or how many days she needed to feed it for. And I think in this time of difficult cost of living circumstances, I think this is such a good skill to learn. And I was lucky enough to learn it because I lived with my grandmother for a few years. And I think once you get used to the idea, you start seeing leftovers as a gift rather than a burden. I love having leftovers in the fridge, but I always know what to do with it that will turn it into another meal, so I'm not eating the same meal all the time. Like, genuinely, as we speak, I have a fridge full of leftovers, which is brilliant because I know I have lunches ready and prepped for the week ahead. And if I don't have that in my fridge, I'll just end up having toast again or skipping lunch. And it's just something that I really don't think is a good idea to do because I get hungry mid-afternoon. So just as an example, my husband made roast beef on Sunday, and we always get a piece of beef that is way bigger than we actually need just for the 2 of us, because let's face it, my children don't eat roast meat either. Yesterday for lunch, I sliced off a few thin slices. I marinated it with onions and peppers and lemon and orange juice. I heated up a pack of mixed rice. It was pre-cooked. Essential pantry item as far as I'm concerned if you're working from home. And then while that was heating up, I quickly fried up the beef until it was crisp to make crispy Cuban beef. It was such a delicious meal. Brought it together in less than 10 minutes. And it was so good. And I know I'm lucky because I work from home, right? I run my own business, so I work from home. So I can create meals like that for lunch. But genuinely, it took me 10 minutes. And I think it's quite helpful because it enforces me to take a proper lunch break while I cook the meal, while I sit down to eat it. Because otherwise, it is so easy to take that proper lunch break when you work from home. So we still have some of the beef left over. So for another meal this week, I might whiz it up and make it into minced beef to cook with mushrooms to make a bolognese or a lasagna. Or I have some leftover noodles from yesterday's laksa dinner. So I might make a Thai-style beef noodle salad, which would be where I'd quickly kind of marinate some thin slices in a Thai-style marinade, quickly fry them, maybe with some sugar snap peas and some baby sweet corn, and then serve it, with the noodles warmed up, for example. And in case you're wondering, yes, the template recipes for both the Cuban and the Thai beef are going to be in the meal guide. Like, I am literally showing you how I think about my food and how I think about leftovers and how I think about stocking my fridge to allow myself to create meals that I want to eat, that I know my family will eat. And just to elucidate, in case you're wondering how that would fit with my fussy eaters, I might eat those things for lunch on my work days rather than eat it for dinner. Or I might prepare 1 or 2 side dishes that I know they'll eat. Like, they both really quite like eating rice. So I'll make rice. I'll probably cook it in bone broth to kind of increase the nutritious quality of it. They both eat noodles. They really like noodles. So yesterday when I made a laksa, for example, which is like a slightly spicy noodle soup, I made a clear ginger noodle soup for them, which I know they'll eat with the noodles as well. And the option is always there to try what we are eating as well. So that is an important part to me because I like eating family style. Like, I like eating all together, but I don't like having to cook several meals. Like, that just doesn't work for me unless I'm cooking. Sometimes I do cook a slightly more special meal for just my husband and I to eat after the children have gone to bed, because I know what that's like. Sometimes you just want to have a quiet dinner. So it is all about understanding how you can adapt the food that you're eating for your fussy eaters, or adding some side dishes for them that you know that they will eat, even if they actually won't eat the main dish itself. So I am so excited. Like, I'm genuinely so excited. I really think the what I'm putting into the meal guide is going to be so valuable. And I wanted to write something like this for ages, but I held back because I just didn't think that people would want it, given, there are so many recipe books out there. Like, I literally have a bookshelf. I have a whole bookshelf full of recipe books that I never look at. I have the whole of the internet at my fingertips. But that's the problem, isn't it? There is so much options out there. There's so many recipes out there. It's overwhelming, and and it's confusing. So that's why in the guide I help you work out what to cook based on what you have in the fridge, what you might have bought in, and what your taste buds tell you want, rather than like specific recipes. And of course you get to fit it into your personal context, so it fits into your life, whether you work from home, whether you're a stay-at-home mum, whether you're a single mum who works outside the house 6 days a week. Like, it should work. It is adaptable. There are loads of really quick ideas in there to cook really quick, simple food that hopefully you will all enjoy, and if not, you will know how to adapt it for your family. I genuinely think it's going to make your life so much easier, because I walk you through how to meal plan as well, so you can predict what's coming up, always have the right ingredients to hand, and massively reduce that stress at mealtime. But most of all, what I think it's going to do is it's going to save you time, because we can waste so much time looking at the fridge, wondering what to make for dinner before we, give up and just get something out of the freezer, for example, or make something and they reject it, and then you have to go back and make something else. It's that mental load, isn't it, of I just don't know what to cook for dinner tonight. I'm so tired of having to think and make that decision. And ultimately, I know what you want. Like, you want to spend more time with your children. And so when you save that time on the cooking, when you make a meal plan and you've saved that time, you have way more space for cuddles and less of that wasted food as well. So the guide's going to be ready towards the end of November. I'm recording that as we speak. It's about 3 weeks away. So if you want to be reminded when it's ready to buy, and if you want to get sneak peeks and tips as well as I create it, I'm still working on it as we speak, then you can join the waitlist on tashadecruz.com/waitlist. And if you really can't wait until then, if you really were like, I need help right now, you can start with my hassle-free meals template guide. It's my free guide, and it's one of the concepts in there I take even further in the meal planning guide that I'm creating right now. But the hassle-free meals template guide is the free guide that you can download to creating meals using these recipe formulas. And in it, I do actually give you a 6-week meal plan as a starting point. So if you want to get hold of that before you kind of instead of having to wait for the meal planning guide that I'm writing at the moment, you go to tashadecruz.com/template. So I hope that was helpful. And just before I go, I just wanted to say this. Whatever your context, whatever the children you have, however things are going, I know you're doing your best. Trust your instincts to know that you know what your children are like. You know what they will and won't eat. Focus on your own family's unique needs. I know you want to spend more quality time with your children, so focus on that, and I think everything else will follow. Thanks once again for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Bye for now.